In May 17, 1954, the Supreme Court outlawed school segregation in the case Brown v. Board of Education. On July 11, 1954, the White Citizens Council was formed to resist desegregation. Emmett Lewis Till was murdered in Money, Massachusetts for speaking to a white woman on August 28, 1955. Rosa Parks was arrested in Montgomery, Alabama for refusing to give up her bus seat to a white woman on December 1, 1955. Following this, the Montgomery bus boycott began on December 5, 1955. Almost a year later, on November 13, 1956, the Supreme Court banned segregated seating on Montgomery buses. On August 29, Congress passes the first Civil Rights Act since Reconstruction, known as the Civil Rights Act of 1957. President D. Eisenhower ordered federal troops to enforce school segregation in Little Rock, Arkansas on September 24, 1957. Over 2 years later, on February 1, 1960, black students staged a sit-in at a whites-only lunch counter in Greensboro, North Carolina. Following that, on April 16, 1960, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee was founded to promote youth involvement in the civil rights movement. On December 5, 1960, the Supreme Court outlawed segregation in bus terminals. January 6, 1961, the University of Georgia was desegregated after a federal judge orders that 2 African American students be admitted. Freedom Riders were attacked in Alabama while testing out desegregation laws on May 14, 1961. Federal marshals were sent to protect civil rights activists that were threatened by a mob in Montgomery, Alabama on May 21, 1961. Almost a year later, on April 1, 1962, civil rights groups joined together to launch a voter registration drive to encourage African Americans to vote. Riots erupt on September 30, 1962, when James Meredith enrolls at Ole Miss University. On May 3, 1963, Birmingham police attacked children marching under protest with dogs and fire hoses. The Alabama governor stands in Schoolhouse Door to prevent university integration on June 11, 1963. Medgar Evers was assassinated in Jackson, Mississippi on June 12, 1963. On August 28, 1963, 25,000 Americans marched on Washington for civil rights. On September 15, 1963, Addie Mae Collins, Denise McNair, Carol Robertson, and Cynthia Wesley were killed in the bombing of 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama. The 24th Amendment to outlaw poll tax in federal elections was added to the Constitution on January 23, 1964. Freedom Summers brings 1,000 civil rights volunteers to Mississippi on June 20, 1964. President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964 on July 2, 1964. On June 21, 1964, James Chaney, Andrew Goodwin, and Michael Schwerner were abducted and slain by Klansmen. Jimmy Lee Jackson was a civil rights marcher that was killed by a state trooper in Marion, Alabama on February 26, 1965. State troopers beat back marchers at Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama on March 7, 1965, also known as Bloody Sunday. Following Bloody Sunday on March 25th, civil rights march from Selma to Montgomery was completed. On July 9th, Congress passes the Voting Rights Act of 1965. On June 12, 1967, the Supreme Court made interracial marriage legal in the case Loving v. Virginia.